Hello and welcome to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name is Dylan Jackson. Today, I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. Just before recording, we got some pretty, I don't want to say exciting news, but interesting news that we can now talk about alongside what we were going to talk about. And I'm interested to see your reactions about the bevy of league altering trades that have gone down over the last 90 minutes or so.
Yeah, we've gotten four of them, right?
Three or
The
four.
three or four. We'll start with the most recent that just dropped, I think, like 3 minutes ago, something like that. We have a trade from the Kansas City Chiefs that is going to send Sky Moore to the San Francisco 49ers for some sort of late round pick compensation. Uh, Sky Moore was relevant for my Dynasty League drafts several years ago, and honestly haven't really heard his name since that point. San Francisco, we're going to talk about them a little bit later in the draft, but they are just devoid of receiving talent just due to the amount of injuries on their team currently. Brandon Ayuk is probably going to be out until weeks, I don't know, 4 through 6, maybe. Juwan Jennings is currently hurt. They just had a suspension handed to Demarcus Robinson for the first 3 weeks of the season. So the official compensation is a pick swap in the sixth and seventh rounds for the Chiefs and 49ers. But definitely a minor move, but he's somebody that's going to add a little bit of depth to this 49ers receiving core.
I think Sky Moore is probably most known for going just before George Pickens, if I recall
Yeah.
correctly, in that
Right there.
draft. That was 2022, right? So that was the Chris Olave year and all those guys. But yeah, just before Pickens, George Pickens got traded too, so you never know what's going to happen. But you told or like you nailed it. They need depth at the wide receiver position. Ayuk's out. Jawan Jennings had a calf, I think. We don't know how much time he's going to miss. Another rookie from last year, Jacob Cohen, is hurt. They drafted Jordan Watkins from Ole Miss. He's hurt. And then you said Demarcus Robinson's out. So before this trade, it was Ricky Pearsall, their first round pick, who, by all reports, is looking really good. That's what you want to hear. And then guys like Russell Gage, and that's the only. Robbie Chosen, if he sticks around. So
Robbie
we
Chosen.
we have some familiarity with him. But now you have Sky Moore in the fold as well. So at minimum, they'll be able to field four receivers that have caught NFL passes before during week one, which you kind of need to do in a Shanahan system, but it's still not a great outlook.
So, how many passes do you think Sky Moore caught last year for the Kansas City Chiefs, if you had to guess?
Last year, zero.
Yeah, none. He was a non-factor for that team, even with like an ACL injury to Rishi Rice. I don't know if there was like an injury that happened there with Sky Moore, but only played in 6 games, only 3 targets, no receptions, never had more than 250 receiving yards. Still, I guess he has maybe some untapped talent, but even going back to, I think it was Western Michigan that he played at, he was really more of a gadget type of receiver than somebody who is actually going to excel in route running. So I'm interested to see if he's somebody that plays kind of the Debo Samuel role in that 49ers offense more so than, lining up wide outside and running a bevy of routes.
Yeah, I'm trying to find where I had him on my board in that class. That was the first time I did my own draft stuff. 99th actually is where I had
Okay.
Sky Moore, just after recently extended tackle Zach Thomas from Wake Forest, who went a little bit later than 98 in the draft. But I think not to brag or anything, but I think getting him right there was a good value for the Packers.
So I'm going to list off just the receivers in that draft class because I think it's like a really interesting group, actually. Starting in the first round, you had Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, Jahan Dotson, Traylon Burks. For incredibly good football players to not so good ones. And then after that, like the second round is like the most interesting group of receivers to me. You had Christian Watson go to the Packers, Wan'Dale Robinson to the Giants, John Mechie to Houston. You had the Patriots take Tyquan Thornton.
Mechie to the Eagles now,
Yeah.
because he was traded a couple of days ago.
George Pickens to the Steelers, Alec Pierce to the Colts, and Sky Moore to the Chiefs was the last one in the first two rounds. After that, there's like, I don't know, Romeo Dobbs in the fourth, Bo Melton, if you care about him. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting kind of receiving class. But to that point, I do want to say, I want to give the Chiefs a little bit of credit. They didn't take Sky Moore above George Pickens.
So I got that one wrong. It was still what, like in the 50s or something? Like it was relatively.
Yeah, they were within 3 picks. Alec Pierce
Okay.
went between them, so it was close. And I think that was a year that the Chiefs had 2 second-round picks as well. So,
Was that
um,
did they not just give up Tyreek Hill and then this
I,
draft happened, or
I think
was it the following season?
I think this was the Tyreek Hill trade off
Okay.
season, if I had to remember. Because I think this was the year that they took, let's see, I think it was George Karlaftis and Trent
McDuffie.
McDuffie in the
Okay.
first round. And then I can't remember their other second round pick for some reason. Maybe I think it was like Brian Cook or something. But yeah, I mean, still a pretty solid draft class for that Chiefs team. Let's move on to the next trade that kind of just happened. The Saints traded a 2026 fourth round pick and a 2027 seventh round pick for Broncos receiver Devon Vele. What was your immediate reaction to this trade?
Why? Like, why did they feel the need to do this? It's not even just why did they feel the need to make the trade. Why'd they throw the future seventh round pick in for it too? That's almost nothing on the Jimmy Johnson trade chart. It's like worth half a point out of the 3,000 or whatever. But there's just why. Like, are they trying to help Sean Payton? Do they still feel like they owe him for the lone Super Bowl that he brought to that franchise? I don't get it. Devon Vele wasn't a difference maker last year as a rookie for the Broncos. They were obviously looking for a way out so they can start Troy Franklin, who was a rookie from last year, and Pat Bryant, who's a rookie this year. I just don't get it. I don't think he's going to elevate the Saints beyond what I think as a community thought they were going to be.
This is probably going to be a top 105 ish pick if I
Mhm.
had to guess. And, the Saints giving that up in next year's draft when it's an already lost season. This isn't even going to be like their wide receiver two or anything like that. Like, this is a 27-year-old second year receiver. Like, it doesn't really make much sense to me. I'm kind of struggling to find the reasoning behind why they would make a trade like this, adding a win now player to just a lost season and a wide receiver room. I think that's already like pretty good, at least their first two starters.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm pretty lost on this one for New Orleans.
I see the vision. Think about who they drafted to be their potential starter this year, and the age and the wizen or the wisdom knowledge that he can bring. Maybe Vele is like that, you know. Maybe Tyler Shuck identified a kindred spirit and asked the Saints brass to trade for a guy like that. That might be the plan.
Man, the Broncos spending a seventh round pick on Devon Vele, getting that seventh round pick back, but in 2027, and a fourth round pick in 2026, that's kind of a coup. I think like
Mhm.
this is just an all around phenomenal trade by the Denver Broncos, and I struggle to find the reasoning. I don't even like. I'm just not sure Devon Vele is that good of a receiver. This is Jonathan Mingo territory for a trade to me, honestly. Cowboys giving up a fourth round pick for somebody who is productive but still end of day like a wide receiver 3 or 4 on most teams. So not a fan for the Saints, but good on the Broncos for building their depth enough to be able to make a move like this.
Yeah, and I think the only other trade of consequence that's happened recently was the Harrison Phillips deal. Minnesota sent Phillips, the nose tackle, to the Jets, if I recall correctly, for a 6-7 swap, right? Sixth round and seventh round pick swap, I believe, in this
Yes.
upcoming draft. I think the Vikings were pretty deep along the interior defensive line after signing Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. So they probably felt like they could get an asset for him. So can't really blame him there. I kind of like it for the Jets because Phillips is one of the more consistent run stoppers from that interior. Pairing him with Quentin Williams and the two young edge rushers in Will McDonald and Jermaine Johnson, who we talked about last week as potential breakout guys. I kind of like that deal for the Jets, like an on the margins after training camp before the season kind of deal.
Yeah, my first thought when I saw this is the Vikings. I believe that they were pretty poor on assets before this deal, so I almost wonder if it was a precursor to a wide receiver type of trade. It was funny. We were talking about it in our 2 point conversion chat a little bit today, but today Jordan Addison left today's practice for the Vikings. Ty Felton left early too. So the first team receivers, because I don't think Justin Jefferson has been practicing either. It's Lucky Jackson, Jashawn James, and Thayer Thomas, something like that. Which I don't know if you've heard of those guys. I certainly haven't. Um, it's pretty bad in that receiving room. And I think like doing a move like this, adding two sixth round picks, I think that's going to allow them to maybe make a move on the margins to improve that room, at least for the first few weeks of the season.
They're going to need to, right? At least they had Jordan Addison to practice and play in the preseason games, but he's going to miss the first 3 games with his suspension. Well, I would imagine Justin Jefferson plays week 1, but still, you need capable NFL bodies out there. And if you can get a guy like Sky Moore, like somebody who's not going to be a world beater by any means, but someone who's caught NFL passes before, I think loading up the late round picks for a move like that, it's pretty good move by them.
I think that's it for the trades that we were going to cover. So let's go ahead and get into the actual topics that we wanted to talk about today. And it first off, it's the quarterback battles. It's kind of the ones that have been settled, the ones that haven't. We're just gonna do a general overview of the Indianapolis Colts, the Cleveland Browns, the New Orleans Saints, some takeaways for each team, and we're gonna start with the Colts. And Daniel Jones was just named the Week 1 starter by head coach Shane Steichen earlier this week. Um, Daniel Jones, I think this is going to end up being kind of a statement of the reliability of Daniel Jones over Anthony Richardson, even though I think everybody would agree that Richardson is clearly incredibly talented in terms of what he can do on the football field. He's not somebody that's been able to stay healthy going all the way back to high school. Like it's year 3. He has less than 350 NFL passing reps. Um, the Colts, everybody there's on the hot seat. So I think that having somebody that's, as unreliable as Anthony Richardson has been with the injuries is just, not something that they're going to be willing to risk, at least early in the season before things, in my opinion, it's probably going to go pretty south pretty quickly for this team. Just the vibes are already pretty rough for this Colts team, and this announcement certainly didn't do it for the fans in Indy for their top 5 pick. That's exciting to watch. So, definitely not something that would inspire confidence with this Colts team moving forward, but maybe it ends up being the responsible decision and they're able to kind of squeak by with their running game and winning games close.
Well, if you think about Richardson's rookie season, in which what was it, like week 3 or 4 that he suffered the injury and was out for most of the year, they were able to scrape by with Gardner Minshew. They didn't make the playoffs; they were just on the fringe there. Last year, when Richardson was mostly healthy, Joe Flacco had a couple, like a cup of tea, cup of coffee there for a few games, but they almost were able to scrape by. I think they were 2 games out of the 7th wild card spot. This year, though, the expectations, I think you're right, were higher than ever before with Shane Steichen. And I think that going Daniel Jones, who he's more reliable in terms of being on the field, and I think he's more reliable as like a system operator to this point than Anthony Richardson is. I think that's what ultimately won the decision for Shane Steichen. These coaches aren't out here trying to tank, right? I don't like the narrative that the Colts are doing this to get the first overall pick or something that a lot of people are alluding to. Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard are battling for their jobs now. And so I think having the guy who he's not necessarily the most secure quarterback, especially in terms of things like fumbling and pocket presence and awareness, but I think Jones can bring a level of stability, even with the flaws that Anthony Richardson wasn't able to do throughout his first two seasons.
If you look at the way that both Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard had talked about Anthony Richardson over the past, really ever since that 2024 season had ended, you can tell that they were the ones above anybody else, fans included, that wanted Anthony Richardson to win out this starting job. I mean, their jobs essentially rely on it at this point. Jim Irsay, known as Chris Ballard's biggest fan, I mean, he's not in that organization anymore. So I think that Chris Ballard's job, because of that, is just going to end up being a little bit more shaky. We'll see about Shane Steichen. I feel like if it's not a playoff year after year 3, it might come to an end for Shane Steichen's coaching tenure in Indianapolis.
I would have to agree, and I think it's kind of unfortunate because out of all the teams we're going to talk about in this segment here, I think the Colts. I think they've done a decent job building the roster around the quarterback. I think the offensive line is decent, despite them losing a couple pieces this season. They have adequate weapons for the quarterback to be able to distribute to, especially after drafting Tyler Warren. Was it 14th or 15th this year in this year's draft? The defense, I think they've done a lot of work on that side of the ball as well. The secondary was horrific last year, and they made a point to have 2 big free agency signings in the secondary, Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward. So I think as far as supporting cast goes, they could certainly make the playoffs if they had the stability and competency at the quarterback spot. I just don't think they have it, even with bringing Daniel Jones in, who we have to remember had a chance last year to kind of solidify his status as the Giants starter after they gave him that mega deal a couple off seasons ago, and he failed to do so and was eventually let go in season. So it's not as if Daniel Jones didn't have a chance elsewhere last year. But ultimately, I think it comes down to trust, reliability. And I think that even going back to last year when Richardson subbed himself out, I think that's kind of when the trust part really became the number one factor for Steichen and Ballard and everybody in that building. Even though they needed him to win the job, ultimately they trusted Daniel Jones more to be a competent starter this season, I guess.
And like you talked about the supporting cast a little bit, I think it's kind of underrated just how good the supporting cast is. Like Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, A.D. Mitchell, Tyler Warren, Jonathan Taylor. That is a legitimately talented offensive core of players. And that's not even talking about like having a perennial all-pro and Quentin Nelson on the line, having guys like Bernard Raymond and other guys on that line as well, who they're expecting to grow and become good players. Tanner Bortolini is their starting center now, who I was pretty high on in that draft class. I know the Colts are high on him, letting Ryan Kelly walk in free agency to the Vikings. So this Colts offense is legitimately talented. It's just a shame that they never quite seemed to get the quarterback aspect right. The defense we'll see, but it doesn't seem like there's confidence in that building behind either of Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. And it's a shame that they're not going to be able to maximize the talent they have on the roster.
For sure. I think Richardson will play at some point in
For
this
sure.
season. There's no, even though Steichen said that it's not a short leash, or it's not a short leash for Daniel Jones, like he'll play into the season. Richardson would or is going to start again at some point. I have 100% faith that he will play games for them because I don't think they're going to be in the playoff hunt, to be quite frank, even though the supporting cast would lend itself to being there with high-end quarterback play.
If you had to give it a percent chance, in the next calendar year, what would you give it that Anthony Richardson is traded?
Like 95%. Like I think he'll play again, but just like as from an audition standpoint. I I just don't think they're going to be in playoff contention. The fact that they went to Daniel Jones already proves to me that, or says to me that they don't feel comfortable having Richardson be the guy to push for the playoffs. And I like there are a lot of teams that could mold his talent, right? This is still one of the better athletes we've seen at the quarterback position in NFL history. I think the key problem with Richardson isn't well, it is the injuries, but it's the fact that he hasn't had like a full season of reps strung together. I think if he could go somewhere where he doesn't even have to start, he could learn behind a consummate, like the Rams, for example. If he could get in the McVay system and learn behind Stafford, be the second team quarterback there, I guess third team with Garoppolo there, I think that would be a good turning point for him. We've seen a lot of the high pick quarterbacks have to be in the right situation. And while I think the Colts are the right situation for a lot of QBs, a lot of young QBs would kill to have the Colts situation. Maybe Richardson just needs a change of scenery. So I think he's going to end up somewhere else around this time next season.
One team that I will point out here that I think would be interesting is the Las Vegas Raiders, who has Geno Smith on, I think it's a short-term deal at this point, like 3 years. The other thing is Pete Carroll was the coach in Seattle when they had 2 first-round picks in the Anthony Richardson draft. Anthony Richardson went 4th, Devon Witherspoon went 5th, JSN went, I think it was 20th in that draft. So he probably has enough knowledge on Anthony Richardson as a player, as a person, to go through that draft process with him potentially being available. And I know a lot of people had mocked that the Seahawks were going to take a quarterback in that draft. I know it didn't happen, but it was certainly a possibility. So I kind of feel like the Raiders are a sneaky good option for Richardson if he does end up getting traded in the next year or so. But we can move on to the next team that we had, and it is the Cleveland Browns. I think arguably the most interesting quarterback situation just because of how many names there are here. Joe Flacco was named the Week 1 starter by Kevin Stefanski earlier this week. It looks as though Cleveland is going to roster all 4 quarterbacks currently that they have. Obviously, Joe Flacco, Shedeur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel, and Kenny Pickett. Last week, I gave you the take that Shedeur Sanders will probably start a majority of the season for them. And I said that on the basis of talent. I do kind of want to caveat that at this point, though. Dylan Gabriel, I think, is going to get his shot first at this point. It just looks as though the Browns trust him more. They're more willing to let him run the offense in the way that Kevin Stefanski wants. He probably fits what they're trying to aim to do this year a little bit more. But, that take last week was in the sense that I just think that Shedeur Sanders is the most talented quarterback on that roster. But I want to get your take on the Cleveland Browns quarterback situation.
Interesting is one way to put it. I think confusing is another way. Kind of outstanding is another term you could use to roster 4 QBs on the 53-man roster. That's what 8% of your roster is just quarterbacks, which and not including your practice squad. They might have Snoop Huntley on the practice squad because he was there in training camp. But I think we all expected Joe Flacco to be the starter. They brought him in for a reason. He won Comeback Player of the Year 2 years ago now with Cleveland. He got him to the playoffs after Watson's. I don't even remember what injury Watson had at that point, but
I completely forgot about that.
Yeah, don't sleep on the Flacco Kevin Stefanski pairing there. He had kind of a Jameis arc. He was throwing touchdowns, but he was throwing a lot of interceptions too. And that came to a head in the playoff game against Houston, where he threw like 3 pick sixes. It was rough. But Joe Flacco, I think we all knew was going to be the starter. I'm going to have to agree with you that Gabriel is going to get his shot first for all the reasons you said, and the fact that they invested more in him than they did in Shedeur Sanders.
Politics. Yeah.
And more than they did with Kenny. What was Kenny Pickett, like a 6th round pick or something? They gave the
he was a 5th round pick
as well.
Yeah.
So still Gabriel more was more of an investment. They let him start. I don't know if he finished the preseason game last week, but I know he played at least the full first half against the Philadelphia Eagles. Hit or miss start, but that's like all rookies are going to have good and bad in their first game. But it's certainly interesting. I think that all three of Flacco, Gabriel, and Sanders will start at some point this year, unless for some reason they're a really good team, which I think both of us don't envision happening. I think the quarterback and the offense as a whole is going to hamstring that team, even though they have decent players on defense. It is interesting to say the least, but I don't think it's unsurprising. The only thing I'll say, I don't know why they're going to keep four QBs. I don't think Pickett really has a chance to stick there. So if there's a team that needs a backup QB, that seemed or like a Pickett trade would scream. Like they just feel like they need to get rid of one of them. I guess is what I'm trying to say. Four QBs is just outrageous on a 53-man roster, in my opinion.
I don't know. It's just kind of funny to me to spend a fifth round pick on Kenny Pickett and then draft two more guys after signing Joe Flacco too. Like I feel like you have to pick your project guy at one point versus just trying to spend, a third round pick and two fifth round picks on three different quarterbacks that all probably just aren't the franchise guy. Um, Shador Sanders obviously is still the most interesting name to me just because I had the highest draft grade on him versus anybody else on that roster. Um, Joe Flacco, we'll see how he looks this year. I've got a feeling that the magic that we saw 2 years ago is just done at this point. He didn't even look
He
particularly
was
good for the Colts last
he was
year.
not magical.
No, it's so funny that he won comeback player of the year over DeMar Hamlin, who like died
Mhm.
on the field. But yeah, man, this Browns team, I'm less optimistic about their offensive weapons too. Like I'm not sure how good Jerry Judy truly is. David Njoku is a year older. I like Cedric Tillman. I like the talent of some of these running backs that they have. We'll see what happens with Quinshawn Judkins, whether he signs before this season or not. Dylan Sampson, Jerome Ford is pretty good, and then I think the combination of this quarterback room combined with the lack of talent and youth on this offensive line could
Yeah.
really end up just making this the worst offense in football, regardless of what these skill guys look like.
I think it's going to be bad, which makes it even more baffling that when the Trey Hendrickson saga started, I think on Sunday, right? Shameless plug. We have a Trey Hendrickson article up about his trade destinations at the 2 Point Conversion Substack. Go read it. But when I think it was Jordan Schultz, right, announced that there were teams already connected to a Trey Hendrickson trade. One was Carolina, which makes sense, worst defense ever. One was the Indianapolis Colts, who we just talked about. Also makes sense because Lou Anarumo was Trey Hendrickson's defensive coordinator for all 4 years that he was in Cincinnati. Then the third team was the Cleveland Browns. First of all, I don't think they'll trade him within division anyway. Like I wouldn't do that if I were a team trading away a top five-ish player at their position. And second of all, what are the Cleveland Browns cooking? Are they way better than we expect? Like I don't understand the angle here from which they would try to acquire a guy like Trey Hendrickson.
I don't know. I it would be just hilarious to me to have like two $40 million defensive ends on your team and then another like $70 million quarterback that doesn't play and then like nothing else. Just everything else is like cap hits of 5 million or less. And um I don't even know financially how the Cleveland Browns could make that work other than just backloading it all until after Deshaun Watson's deal is expired. But man, that one was weird. I can't imagine that would happen just because the in division thing. And then could you imagine trading away Travis Hunter for the package that they did and then using like one of the first round picks on Trey Hendrickson? Like that would be, I don't think that Trey Hendrickson is going to go for that much, but it would just be, I kind of want to live in that timeline just to see the reactions of everybody. But we can move on to New Orleans Saints. Man, this is like the most uninspiring quarterback battle of this year, I think, just because it's like it's between two guys that, one didn't really look that good last year in Spencer Rattler. I know he was a rookie 5th round pick. And then Tyler Shuck is like every single clip I have seen of Tyler Shuck in practice is like him rolling out in 7-on-7s, like feeling pressure that's not there, and then just like kind of throwing it up. I mean, he's better than that. I get it. He's a 2nd round, 40th overall pick quarterback. Um, the fact that this is even a battle, that Spencer Rattler is looking like he's the better quarterback than Tyler Shuck, is like, if your rookie 25-year-old quarterback isn't starting with like Spencer Rattler as the competition, it might already just be a lost pick to me.
Where do you think Tyler Shuck would have been drafted 2 years ago in the Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May draft? Like 5th round? Like, given the season he put out there this year.
I'm trying to think of all the quarterbacks that were drafted that year.
Well, there were 6 of them in round
Um,
1.
there were 6 in round 1. Were there any taken in on day 2? I don't. I'm scrolling through it right now. There weren't any taken
I
on
think
day
there was a
2.
big gap. Like the 5th round, I think was the next QB, and it was no, because Kyle McCord went back. It was a Big Ten guy, if I'm not
It was
mistaken.
Spencer Rattler in the
Oh,
fifth
it
round.
was Spencer Rattler. Well, there,
Okay.
there you go. So he would have been drafted around where Spencer Rattler is, in my opinion. I think he was drafted at pick 40 because of necessity, right? Because it was a weak
Yeah.
quarterback class, because the Saints didn't choose to draft Dart or Sanders or Milrow. Pick what they have 9, so they needed a QB. But it is very uninspiring that he hasn't taken the reins, given not only his higher draft pedigree, but his experience. And I say that as a good thing. I know he played 7 years in college. That means 7 years of being in different systems, playing in different offenses with different play callers and players around you, at least in practice, because he was hurt a lot of the time. You should have the experience of being well traveled enough to come in and hit the ground running. I think that was one of the major appeals to him. There weren't many from my end when I did my evaluation, but that was one of them. And he just hasn't done that. Then you go back to all the stuff he was doing in college. It was very gimmicky, a lot of schemed open stuff when the stuff was working. And then when it wasn't working, he was looking like he was giving us some Will Levis moments in terms of memes and just funny things that he did. That's kind of the stuff you don't want to see carry over from college to the pros. And you're kind of seeing stuff like that. Even in the preseason game, if I'm not mistaken, he threw the pick 6 before his first touchdown, right? His first touchdown was
He did.
wide open. And then, or I guess right before the end of the half, he just throws an easy pick 6. Like I remember Josh Norman taking like 4 of those to the house in that 2015 season. So a lot of ups and downs with him, but I think it's very telling that he hasn't beaten out a 5th round 2nd-year player.
I'm going to sound like an old head when I say this, but it's almost like Tyler Shuck plays scared a little bit because of the amount of injuries that he's had throughout his college career. I mean, that's why he stayed for, you said, 7 years in college, several different schools. Like I did a deep dive on Tyler Shuck's college film after Derek Carr retired. And I understand the appeal with taking him in the mid rounds. I maybe wouldn't have done it 40th overall, but I can see where they were coming from with that selection. Functional NFL arm strength. He's really good when throwing to his first read. Really good when he has a perfect pocket. Unfortunately, in the NFL, despite this like offensive tackle duo looking really young and promising, I really like Kelvin Banks and Tylese Fuaga. Um, I think that the circumstances at which Tyler Shuck is, he needs to succeed. I think it's way too perfect than what he's going to end up getting in the NFL, and I think that's going to end up coming back to bite the Saints. So I'm not a huge fan of where this team is probably going to end up going in 2025, and that's likely the top 3 to 5 pick. And it's even more icing on the cake that they traded away their 4th round pick for probable wide receiver 3 on that team. So not a huge fan. I feel for Chris Olave. I hope he signs a contract extension before playing another game, because he needs it, I think, more than anybody else on this team, especially after the concussions. So hope that for Chris Olave.
For sure. Not to ruin the perfect transition, but real quick, who do you think is going to win the starting role for the Saints?
I know I'm biased. I watched him at South Carolina every game, every snap. I have to think that Spencer Rattler is going to win out, at least from what I've seen in the Saints 2 preseason games. He's looked like the better quarterback. Um, I think I was listening to Football 301 with Nate Tyson. He said actually that, the better quarterbacks in both games, which was whichever guy got to play against the backups or in the second half. And I couldn't agree more with that. But I think Spencer Rattler is used to dealing with the pressure that comes with an NFL front seven. I also think he just has more physical talent than Tyler Shuck. Maybe Shuck ends up winning out just because he's better in structure, but I don't know how good the structure of the team is going to be when the talent on this offense is as bad as it is. So I lean Spencer Rattler, but I wouldn't at all be shocked if Tyler Shuck won first week. And I think no matter what, both of these guys are going to get between 7 and 10 starts each. So I don't think it's going to be like Rattler the whole season or Tyler Shuck the whole season. Maybe it's like a mystery third option that we haven't gotten yet. Anthony Richardson, maybe. But yeah, I think it's likely to be Rattler, at least week 1.
I'm with you. The only thing I think that would start or make Tyler Shuck start would be the politics, right? Top 40 pick and a new head coach who's not particularly attached to Spencer Rattler. I think that's a factor as well. Kellen Moore might want to play his guy, but regardless, I expect neither of those guys will be the 2026 starter. And I think that's a good.
I think no matter what, the Saints are gonna be due for like I don't know, 30-7 loss in week 1 against Arizona. It feels like one of those classic unproven quarterback, first year head coach type of situations. Ironically, the Saints did it to the Panthers last year when they won like 43-7 or whatever it was. So I think no matter what, if you're in a survivor pool, I would take the Cardinals over the Saints in week 1.
That's your fantasy advice for the week on Football Talk. But like we were alluding to, I don't think either of those guys are going to start for the Saints in 2026 unless they shock the world. And with that in mind, you brought up a good note in the notes here. It's week 0 for the college football season. I like college football more than the NFL. It's probably because when I was a kid and my dad would have college football on TV, excuse me, he was a big Alabama fan. And so that's what I grew up watching. And so I learned to love college football a lot more because Alabama won a lot more when I was a little kid watching. But it is week 0. We have a top 25 matchup in week 0 for the first time in over 20 years. It's Farmageddon, which is Iowa State and Kansas State, but it's in Ireland this year. So they're calling it Farm-O-Geddon, like the Irish spelling there. Cute little tidbit, but college football is back. And with that, the NFL draft is looming closer and closer, right? A lot of the football fans that aren't fans of the college like rivalry and all the history and stuff, a lot of them only care about the draft. That's kind of what we're here to talk about today and kick off the 2026 NFL draft coverage.
I think this is our first 2026 NFL draft segment of just this entire cycle, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. It's fun. I personally cherish the draft more than the actual Super Bowl, which sounds crazy to say, but I think part of that's just because I'm a Panthers fan that kind of has to at some point. But um, yeah, week 0, I'm super excited. It's going to be 11 a.m. football for where I am. Iowa State, Kansas State. Um, there's another game like Fresno State, Kansas, or a few others, but I'm mainly looking forward to the weekend after that when I have to wait until
Ooh.
Sunday to watch South Carolina play against the Virginia Tech Hokies, the Beamer Bowl, if you will. But I'm excited. Yeah, there's actually a lot of fun matchups. Texas, Ohio State, right?
Yep,
Like
at
that's going to be
big
awesome.
noon kickoff. I hate that Fox has the Big Ten because you get all the Ohio State games at noon, which is very unfortunate because they're a very good team. But it means you get some of the other good games later. You have Notre Dame and Miami on Sunday. I believe that's another top 10 matchup. Clemson, LSU, which is Saturday night, is another top 10 matchup. We have 3 top 10 matchups and a couple top 25s in week 1. I'm just looking for some of them. Alabama, Florida State. Florida State's not good anymore, but hopefully that'll be a good game. There were a couple more. Colorado plays somebody big on Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Auburn Baylor is also on Friday, so a lot of good games. App State Charlotte in the Bank of America Stadium. That's
That's
not a
awesome.
huge game, but
Yeah.
for local people, I also went to Charlotte, so that's a big game for me. This is like the most packed week 1 I can remember, but it's week 0 this week, and fortunately, we have I think 5 FBS games to watch on Saturday. None of them are going to contain any of the guys we'll talk about here, but I think you wanted to start the draft cycle coverage with some of the stuff that was said in the last week or so regarding maybe the most popular quarterback prospect to come out since Andrew Luck.
Let's have the Arch Manning conversation. He has thrown less than 100 career passing attempts, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a incredibly limited sample size. Obviously, Quinn Ewers has been there the last 2 years that Arch has been at Texas. Texas has like just an incredible roster this year. I mean, pretty much every year at this point. Like they're officially, like, I remember when I was younger, they'd be not ranked. They'd be, 6, 7 wins perennially, but they're officially back. Steve Sarkisian has done incredible things with that program. Recently, Archie Manning, the former Saints quarterback, the one that was good in, like, I don't know, the 70s, he made a comment that Arch was not going to enter the 2026 NFL draft. Arch Manning backtracked on that comment that Archie made. I know it's very confusing with the names here, Archie versus Arch, but Arch backtracked on his grandfather's comment, saying that he could end up entering the 2026 NFL draft, but he's just taking it day by day at this point. Um, to me, it would kind of be ironic if Archie, or if Arch rather, ends up on the Saints, for instance, his grandfather's team. Um, I still tend to think that Arch is going to end up in 2027, just get 2 full years of starting quarterback play under his belt. But overall, it's just a loaded quarterback class, top to bottom. There's like, I don't know, 7, 8 guys that could potentially go in the first round. Um, but what do you make of just Arch Manning, his overall play, what you expect from him this year, and whether he ends up going in the 2026 NFL draft?
I think he'll be exciting because he brings a little bit more in the athleticism
Yeah.
department than Quinn Ewers was able to do. Ewers, a lot of it was due to injuries and taking big hits, but he was kind of statuesque in his last season at Texas. Arch is able to move. When they would bring Arch in on 4th downs, it wasn't to let him throw; it was to have him run out to the flat and get the 4th and 1 or 4th and 2. Did that quite a bit in their playoff run. I think I can remember one against Ohio State where he got stuffed, but he's an athletic quarterback, much more athletic than Archie or Peyton or Eli. He's like the prototype of
Definitely more
the Manning
athletic than those
lineage.
guys.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember the one Peyton Manning clip where he faked it and walked it around against
I
the
remember.
Cowboys. I
Yeah.
think Arch will be a little bit faster if that ever happens in his pro career, but not a ton of experience, a lot of hype. As far as expectations go, I think Texas as a whole this year should be the favorite to win the SEC. They lost a lot of talent. I think people are underrating how much they lost on the offensive line in particular, but I think they're very talented. I think it'll be a three-horse race between them, Georgia, and Alabama ultimately. But I think the expectations are high for Arch. He's had this pedigree follow him his whole life, fair or unfair, just because his last name is Manning. He is one of the, I think it's 3 recruits all time to have a perfect recruit ranking. Trevor Lawrence and Ewers, funnily enough, were the other 2. But he didn't do any of like the offseason camps as a high schooler, like Elite 11 or Rivals, just to kind of keep that image as the perfect recruit, if you will. And so I have high expectations of him. I expect him to be a Heisman candidate, like his grandfather was at Ohio State. His grandfather's actually the only 2-time Heisman, or no, that's Archie Griffith, excuse me, not Archie Manning. But if Arch is a Heisman candidate this year, I think that will fit perfectly. I don't think he'll be in the 2026 draft. I think, ironically, he'll make much more at Texas from NIL deals, from sponsorship deals, from the fact that his name is Manning and he carries so much weight at that university. You got to remember, he chose Texas after Quinn Ewers transferred there. Like, this was a plan that he and his camp had in mind. I think he stays all 4 years. If I'm not mistaken, both Peyton and Eli played or started at least 2 years before they entered the draft. So I could see that playing out as well. And I don't think he can really dodge a destination, because the really bad teams like Cleveland or the Saints can make sure that they're really bad for multiple consecutive years. But I think the fact that there are so many QBs in this class, it might behoove Manning to stay another year and be in kind of a 2-horse race between he and DJ Lagway from Florida. But I don't think he's going to be in the draft. I would be surprised if he did. But if he were in the draft, he would be among the top guys taken in round 1.
And there's a ton of guys that could go in round 1, right? I'm gonna list off a ton. But before I do that, there's just like the amount of teams that could potentially get the first overall pick this year. New Orleans, Cleveland, Tennessee, both New York teams, Indianapolis, we talked about. Maybe Vegas has a disaster year. Miami, we talked about them on like the regression candidates episode. There's a lot of different teams that A, could get the first overall pick, and then B, would potentially be interested in taking a quarterback. And this class has like no shortage of talent. Obviously, my king, Lenora Sellers, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeyer, Drew Aller, Fernando Mendoza is a favorite of a lot of people that I listen to personally. Sam Levitt and Moneyline Mateer. what you put in the notes. So
that's what we're calling him this season. Prior to we'll call it the Venmo gate with John Mateer, I've been a huge fan of his, even going back to Washington State. The reason Washington State didn't fall off the map after Cam Ward left was because Mateer stepped up and performed really, really well. I have like a precursor draft article coming hopefully before Saturday, so we can get it out there before week 0 starts. But he's one of my favorites to be the top QB in this class. I think he has all the tools, and being at Oklahoma, well, Oklahoma is probably near the bottom of the barrel of the SEC right now in terms of, I guess, coaching and talent. It's much better than what he had at Washington State. But yeah, guys like Sellers is probably my favorite quarterback in the class now. Cade Klubnik improved a ton, not only over last season, over his entire career. He was like borderline unplayable his freshman and sophomore years, but he grew a lot. Ultimately led them to an ACC championship, comeback championship against SMU, and a playoff berth. Nussmeyer, his dad, Doug Nussmeyer, is the offensive coordinator in New Orleans, and New Orleans is 2 hours from Baton Rouge. You're probably more familiar with that area than I am.
1 hour,
at this point.
yeah,
1 hour.
Even.
So the close family ties there. Drew Aller has been kind of the presumed number 1 guy over the last couple of years. Fernando Mendoza, who you mentioned, Cal transfer. He's going to be playing at Indiana this year. Curtis Rourke was drafted, I think, in the 7th round by San Francisco, but I think he's a bit more athletically gifted than Rourke was at Indiana. Indiana's its whole thing with the coach and all the stuff they're talking about. So I'm not going to get into Indiana. Sam Levitt at Arizona State. He led them to a Big 12 championship last year. I think he and Jordan Tyson are going to be a good pair. The wide receiver. Tyson's my wide receiver one to start the cycle, and then John Mateer. And then you have guys that are on the fringe, like Carson Beck. Going into last year, was going to be the number one overall pick QB. Like that's who everyone thought. Obviously, he has a bad year, but he transferred to Miami and Cam Ward went there and became the number one overall pick. Then you have like fringe guys who haven't really played a ton, like Ty Simpson at Alabama. I don't know if he's going to be super good or not, but it's Alabama. They have the talent to make a lot of quarterbacks look good, right? Mac Jones was a top 15 pick coming out of Alabama. So there are a lot of quarterbacks in this class. And like you said, no shortage of teams needing them. Do you think there's any non-QBs that could go first overall?
So I wrote down three. You can feel free to expand on this list, but to me, it's like the three blue chip players to me at premier positions, at least right now. First, Caden Proctor, the tackle from Alabama. I thought about including Spencer Fano, the tackle from Utah,
Mm.
on this list too, but um, I think that Proctor is, just because of the physical traits that he brings, is probably going to end up being the first tackle taken. Again, things can change. It's always funny to look back on mock drafts from a year before the draft actually took place. TJ Parker and Peter Woods, the edge and interior defensive lineman, both for Clemson. I could see both of those guys going first overall as well. But considering the amount of potential first round quarterbacks in the draft, I think it's pretty unlikely that any of those guys end up the first overall pick. But Peter Woods probably going to end up my just overall number one player. That guy has been just a total game wrecker since he stepped foot on Clemson.
Yeah, he's been a starter since he was a true freshman. And if you know anything about Clemson defensive lines, they really make you earn it. And he earned it the moment he stepped on campus. I think he and the safety from Ohio State, Caleb Downs, are probably the two best players in college football at this point.
Yeah.
The only other guy I would throw on the contender for first overall list would be Keldrick Falk, the edge from
Yes.
Auburn. He's like the defensive version of Caden Proctor. Proctor's like 6'7", 365 pounds. Keldrick Falk is like 6'7", close to 280, and he moves like an outside linebacker. Just like the raw measurables might push him up there over TJ Parker. But some draft people like to take into consideration how well the program does, and I don't think Auburn's going to be as good as Clemson, so that might sway some people. But of all the non-QB players, I think Peter Woods probably has the best chance.
And I can't remember the last time that we've gotten like a defensive tackle first overall. So I'm not sure if it's happened, like, honestly, since I've been watching football. Um, I do want to take a minute just to talk about the overall weapons in this draft class, just because I think that, we've had so many skill position guys that have gone in the first round over the past 3-4 years. Obviously, that like generational receiving draft with Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, Roma Dunze. We had Brock Bowers and Brian Thomas in that draft class last year. I guess this year we had, two tight ends, Teteroa McMillan, Matthew Golden, obviously Ashton Genty as well. This year, I think that the supporting cast talent, again, we are 1 year away from the NFL draft, but the overall supporting cast talent, I think, is significantly worse than your average draft class. All encompassing running back, wide receiver, tight end. You mentioned Jordan Tyson. I think he could potentially be a first round pick. Jeremiah Love, the running back out of Notre Dame, is probably the most surefire guy to me. But like, there's not a single tight end that's currently on my radar for being a first round pick, potentially. Maybe Eli Stowers, but it's pretty rough in terms of the pass catchers and overall offensive weapons.
I have to agree. I think Tyson and maybe Antonio Williams from Clemson, those are kind of the two first round receivers. No tight ends, like you're saying. And then Jeremiah Love, he would be right after Travion Henderson Just looking at what he did last year. Jeremiah Love had an extremely low touch count at Notre Dame last year, and he was still able to produce. I think if he were healthy in the national championship, it's a bit of a different discussion. I don't think Notre Dame wins it, but it was like a one-score game right there at the end because
Yeah.
Ohio State, I think it was Emeka Egbuka had a fumble. I was looking to see who the highest drafted defensive tackles were, and in 1994 the first overall pick, Dan Wilkinson with the Bengals, was the highest since then. I was thinking Ndamukong Suh, but he was only the second overall pick in his class. So it's been what, it would be 32 years if Peter Woods were to go first overall since we've had a defensive tackle. So not likely, but still worthy of being in that discussion.
It was, I think, 2011 when we got Marcel Darius, who,
Number 3.
yeah, I don't remember if you kept up with mock drafts at that point, but Marcel Darius was like, he was number one in a ton of mock drafts to the Panthers at that point. But obviously, Cam Newton, the better guy, better pick, I should say. It worked out for Carolina. I do want to talk about Jeremiah Love just a little bit. He's an incredible football player. I'm not as high on him as a running back as I think most people are. A lot of people talk about him as like a certified potential top 10 pick in the NFL draft. I think I'm more in line of him being like a late first, early second round kind of guy. To me, it's just he doesn't feel as nimble of an athlete as a lot of these more shifty running backs that we're seeing succeed in the NFL today, like Jahmyr Gibbs. Like, we'll see how Travion Henderson looks that you brought up, but he, to me, is kind of a home run hitting, straight line speed type of running back, and that's completely fine. It's just I'm not necessarily sure how well that's going to translate to the NFL as well as some other more well-rounded running backs.
I could not agree more, especially when you look at the tape when he was healthy. I don't know if you were a math guy in school or in college or anything, but like
No.
no. So my degree was in mathematical finance, so I'm a big math guy. And the x squared graph, right? The parabola looks like a U.
I think so.
So yeah, you have your ass, and it looks like a U. His running style reminds me of, it's parabolic, is like I want to call it. He doesn't move horizontally as well as a lot of the guys you mentioned, but once he
Yeah.
finds his sticking point, he kind of curves and goes kind of like half a U shape. That's the whole point of this analogy, but that's kind of how he runs. But once he hits that little curve and up, he's gone. It's very, very hard to catch him. Like I said, I would have him above somebody like Judkins, maybe above Caleb Johnson, but the true top 10 high-end running backs, and that's not even including guys like Amarian Hampton and Henderson, like the Genties, the Bijan Robinsons, the Jahmyr Gibbses, they're on a whole nother level in terms of being able to shake people out of their shoes.
He does remind me of Caleb Johnson a little bit, just like somebody that's not as nimble, who's more of a patient, kind of find your hole and then hit it kind of runner. Just a home run hitting kind of guy. Obviously, I think he's like a little bit quicker, a little bit faster than Caleb Johnson, but I think for me personally, lateral quickness just means a lot when you're evaluating running backs in particular, and he just doesn't quite have as much skill in that area as I wish he did, but still an incredibly fun player and somebody that I think does currently track to be a first round pick, although I think it's more of a borderline first round pick than like a certified blue chip type of player. But with that, we're going to get into the segment that we started last week, grading each other's takes. And we start with your first take.
So we had a really long preamble into this take talking about all the draftable QBs this season. But my first take is that we're going to have at least 5 first-round pick quarterbacks in the 2026 draft. There was a drought last year, right? We only had 2. It was Cam Ward at the top, and then we had to wait all the way till pick 26, I believe, for the Giants to trade back in and get Jackson Dart. So not a lot of teams felt the need to get high-end talent. Maybe they were looking ahead to this season. A lot of the good QBs in college returned for their grad season or for their senior season this year. Guys like Cade Klubnik could have been drafted last year. Drew Aller could have been drafted. The LSU guy, Garrett Nussmeier, could have been drafted. I think Mendoza could have been drafted as well. Like a lot of the high end guys came back probably knowing that the 2026 draft was a bit richer for QBs. I think as far as public perception goes, and this does matter when evaluating more than people think, you're going to have actual high profile QBs be on TV, be in high stakes games later in the season this year. A lot of the guys last year that were in the playoffs that got drafted, guys like Will Howard, Quinn Ewers, guys that weren't ever going to be top of the class, first round picks. But this year, you're going to have guys like if Sam Levitt can get back to the playoffs, he can be in that conversation. Nussmeier, Penn State, Drew Aller is going to be. He was there last year. Carson Beck, if Miami's good, is going to be in the spotlight. Cade Klubnik, excuse me. I expect Clemson to make a pretty deep playoff run, so I think he's going to be there. And then my final point would be we've already seen teams move to get first round picks for this draft. They did it during the draft last year. Both the Rams and the almost said the Colts, the Cleveland Browns have additional firsts, maybe to move up for that QB spot. And they're going to need it because a lot of different teams need QBs. Teams like the Rams, all the QB competition teams we talked about, the Rams for the future with Stafford's uncertainty. Pittsburgh's quarterback is 42 years old. The Jets signed Fields as a bridge QB. And then there's some like questionable ones like Miami. If Tua Tagovailoa continues to be hurt. You mentioned Vegas as like a future play behind Geno Smith. That might be the arch team in 2 years is Las Vegas. And then Arizona if things don't work out there. A ton of teams need QBs. There are a ton of QBs. We're going to see a lot of them in the first round.
So my only qualm with this take is you didn't mention LaNorris Sellers in the list of high-profile quarterbacks that could be playing in the playoff. That's the only one. So I have to drop it a letter grade. So I'm going to give it a B. But I do I like this take. I agree. I think, like you said, at least 5 first-round picks. And I think one trend that we've been seeing a little bit more is I think NFL teams, as of late, have been more willing to take shakier quarterback prospects in the first round. We had Michael Penix go top 10, which I personally did not expect that on draft night. Bo Nix went in the first round. Didn't expect that one. Last year, Jackson Dart, I think you and I both agree that he wasn't a first round prospect, but the Giants were in a position where they needed to take a quarterback. They're on the hot seat, the general manager and the head coach. So they made it happen. There's a ton of teams that need quarterbacks still. The LA Rams, Cleveland Browns both traded for first round picks in 2026 during the 2025 draft, potentially to make that happen. And, there's just the biggest thing here is there's the talent to support it. Last year, we were kind of looking at it as, there's a bunch of maybes as the top quarterback last year. Carson Beck, people, even though he was projected the first overall pick before the college season started last year, I don't think people were like super high on Carson Beck as a quarterback prospect. Like he could have entered in the 2023 or 2024 draft, if I'm not mistaken. And he was projected borderline top 50 at that point. So it's not like the quality was there last year. And there's just so many teams that could end up taking somebody. So I'm going to give it a B only because you excluded LaNorris Sellers in your, high profile quarterback list.
Well, in the playoff hunt.
In the playoff, yeah.
Yeah. So my fault. Maybe South Carolina improves on what they did last year. They don't get the just utterly ridiculous call against LSU. It was like roughing the passer after he threw a pick six or something, which is ridiculous. Maybe
I do want to.
Yeah,
I want to say one thing on that. Have you seen the SEC Netflix show?
I have not. No.
It made me like unreasonably mad watching it. The whole first episode is about South Carolina and the beginning of the 2025 season or 2024 season, sorry. And LSU, beginning of the season as well. And it all culminates in that South Carolina LSU game. And there was no mention of that call at all throughout like the 20-minute segment on that LSU South Carolina game. And I get that the SEC 100% had a hand in that decision, but it just made me like unreasonably angry. I didn't watch another episode after that. And so um, Gamecocks will be back. They'll be better. Hopefully a playoff team. I know they were borderline and would have made it if that call went their way, but it did not. But overall, I grade it a B take from me.
That's fair. As far as South Carolina goes, Sellers, I think, like I said, he's going to be my favorite probably throughout, and I think he should improve. I think there's a lot of defensive pieces that are there or that left in the draft, so we'll have to see how that kind of offsets this season. But what's your first take for today's episode?
So this one's a little bit spicy because it's a little bit more specific. The Chicago Bears, I think, are going to start 0-5. First off, their schedule to start the year is like crazy. They start, Minnesota. I think that's Monday Night Football against Minnesota at home.
Yes.
At Detroit, Dallas at home, at Vegas, at Washington. That's like incredibly hard. Vegas is probably the easiest team there. And even them, I think they have a lot of like veteran talent that's really good. I don't know if you've paid attention to the reports coming out of the Chicago Bears training camp, but they haven't been like overwhelmingly positive. Ben Johnson, known as being a like pretty big stickler for his rules within his offense, and it's also like it's been said that the team seems to be incredibly optimistic about his offense, and compared to last year where things are potentially going to be. But I think ultimately it's just going to take time for things to get settled in. They've been saying like Caleb Williams is drinking from a fire hose with this offense, and like I feel like I've heard that phrase like 5 or 6 times on various different podcasts, or I don't know, Ian Rappaport tweeting an ad or something like that. But I just think that early on, like, the first few weeks of the season, it just might not look as, pretty as what people expected to be. And I'm not even saying that the Bears are going to be a bad team, towards the end of the season. I just think it's going to be more of a slow burn rather than an immediate turnaround. Like we always see the stat at the beginning of the year with first year coaches. They almost always, I think the win rate's like 10%. They almost always start with a loss in the WL column. So I think the Bears are going to start out really rough just because of that schedule. First year coach. I think the offensive rules are going to take a while to get settled in. So the Bears starting 0-5 is my take, or at least the first take that we have.
Insiders and talking heads, I guess, need to get way better at articulating agents' messages, I think is the first takeaway from this specific take. I've seen so many hashtag ads from the insiders on Twitter the last couple of days. It's gotten bizarre. There's one guy who's at the Broncos camp today, just gassing up every single receiver. I don't remember who it was, but I tend to agree with a lot of the points you're saying. Minnesota is going to be Monday Night Football as their first game, so under the lights. And I'm not super sure that a first-time head coach is going to get the win there. At Detroit, maybe there's some extra stakes there for Ben Johnson. It's not like he was pushed out or anything, but that's I'm looking at the Eastern times here because I have the schedule pulled up. So that's at 1 p.m. So that's an early game. Then they host Dallas as a 4:00 game. They go to Vegas for a 4:00 game. Then they have their bye week. And I think that's interesting.
I didn't even notice that.
Early bye, and then week 6 is in Washington, Monday Night Football, Hail Mary rematch game against Jaden Daniels. So with all of that being said, I'm going to give this a B as well. The bye week really throws a wrench in there for me because I think if they get off to an 0-4 start, that bye week is going to be a huge reset game. there's no game on the schedule that has more stakes attached to it than that Washington game, in my opinion. You lost in the most unceremonious way last year. The Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels are going to be forever compared now, just because Jaden Daniels did so much better in his rookie season. So there's going to be a lot at stake there. If they're 0-4, maybe they can rebound after the bye week. That's kind of where my hesitation is, but I tend to agree with you. Not a lot of gimme games for them early in the year, really on their schedule at all. I would say probably Vegas and New York, Cleveland as well. But like Vegas and New York are kind of and New Orleans. We need to win these games because outside of those, it's a tough stretch.
Their division really does them no favors in terms of their schedule. Like, I get that they still have a fourth place schedule, but they have 2 games against the Vikings, 2 against the Packers, 2 against the Lions. Like, that alone is, I mean, it's not kind at all. Maybe they can win 1 or 2 of those this year, but I think this year is just about building the foundation for that team, getting Caleb Williams kind of more up to speed than what was happening last year, which was just an unmitigated disaster on so many different fronts. But like I said, I'm of the mindset that I think by the time the year ends, even with them potentially starting with a pretty poor record, I still think that by the time the season ends, I'm going to be optimistic about where this team is headed compared to most teams' trajectory.
For sure. I'm gonna have one question for you before we move on. Do you think if it's unceremonious to start, Ben Johnson will have the same idea that Dave Canales had to bench Caleb Williams for a stretch, given that they just extended backup Tyson Bagent?
I don't think so. I think that Ben Johnson seems to have like full and complete faith in Caleb Williams, which, after playing games against like Minnesota, Detroit, Dallas, Vegas, Washington, maybe it's a little bit different. And I know the narrative around Bryce Young with Canales changed drastically as well. I have a hard time thinking that Caleb Williams is going to be as bad as Bryce Young was in those 2 games.
Yeah, it was some like unseen level of bad. Especially like
It,
as
it
soon as you
was
saw the first pass be an interception, it was like, oh man. And I think the Chargers game honestly was worse from Young than the Saints game there. But hopefully it doesn't come to that for Bears fans, for Vikings, Packers, and Lions fans. Hopefully it does. But my next take, or my final take of today, is that it's going to touch on something we talked about last week. We did our regression candidates, and one of the teams I think it was you, right, identified were the Atlanta Falcons, and just how stagnant they were in terms of season to season improvement, how poor the defense was, and it actually lost pros on that side. I think that there is a larger runway for it to go poorly than it is for it to go, or for them to have improvement. I think ultimately the Falcons are bad enough to where Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot end the season or end next season not on the Falcons. I think they're going to get fired if things go poorly, and I think things will. They were an 8-9 team last year, and if they didn't improve much in terms of additions to the roster, then you're really banking on intrinsic improvement. And I think a lot of guys like Kyle Pitts is probably tapped out at this point. Bijan Robinson's already really great, so it's hard for me to see him going or becoming even greater. Drake London, kind of the same thing, although he's a bit different because he relies more on the quarterback. And then we have just more and more negative stuff happening to the Falcons. Caleb McGarry, their starting right tackle, went down today in practice. He got carted off. We don't know the extent of his injury yet, but from reporting, it made it seem like it was a big deal. Like they cut off the music and huddled up around him before he was carted off. And if you're going to be losing starters from a unit, by the way, that didn't add any new starters, and not be gaining a ton other than from the 5 rookies you drafted, I wonder how much higher or how much better you can actually be. And so I tend to follow the regression prediction, and I think they're going to be like, let's say a 6-11 or worse, and that ends up having Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris getting fired.
Yeah, I'm going to give this one an A. I just think that there's so much room for things to go pretty terribly for this Falcons team. And you didn't really even mention like the elephant in the room. That's Michael Penix is completely unproven at
Mhm.
quarterback. Like I think a lot of people expect him to be like at least replacement level, like a capable starting quarterback, but there were a lot of ups and there were a lot of really low downs for Michael Penix last year when he started for the Atlanta Falcons. I get that there's excitement around him that, you know, he potentially could maximize this offensive weapon group a little bit better between Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson. I just think that going back to the college tape, he was somebody that was super reliant on it's kind of like the same thing that we talked about with Tyler Shuck, a completely clean pocket.
Mhm.
And he has quality offensive linemen around him. Chris Lindstrom, Tyler Bergeron, I think is how you say his name. Obviously, they've had Jake Matthews holding down the left side for like a decade now. They lost their center, and they might be losing their right tackle for an extended period of time. If you consider that, it's a little bit more scary, I think, for Michael Penix and having to navigate like real pocket pressure. Like same thing with Shuck. I know I just mentioned it, but like he dealt with so many injuries throughout college. That's why he entered the NFL as like a 24-year-old rookie. Um, I'm just a little bit hesitant to see how he looks with, you know, a little bit more muddy circumstances, we'll call it. This team is also going to be incredibly reliant on two rookie pass rushers, which James Pierce has looked pretty incredible in the preseason. Jalen Walker. We'll see how he looks. I think Pierce has been clearly the better player so far. But again, like if you're reliant on like three first and second year players in your starting front four, I'm just not sure how well it's going to go for you, especially if three of them are unproven between Rook, Aurora, Roro, James Pierce, and Jalen Walker. So between those, between the attrition that this team like felt like, I mean, Grady Jarrett's gone. Um, they didn't add anybody offensively. I just think it could be really rough going. And they probably project to be like the third best team in their own division. I know we're both higher on the Panthers being fans of the team, but I do think that it could get pretty ugly. Like, I don't know, 5 to 7 ish wins for this Falcons team.
As far as the Panthers go, like not trying to be homers or anything, just objectively, they added so much more and I think have a
Yeah.
bigger runway to improve from where they were last year. They were a 5-12 group with the worst defense ever. And so if you get the worst defense to 28th, that could lead to 7-ish wins or something like that. With the Falcons, it's hard to see that kind of or that level of improvement. You mentioned I can't pronounce his last name, Rook, the defensive lineman from I think it's Clemson, right? He
Yeah.
didn't play much, if at all, last year, if I'm not mistaken. So you're like, aside from the two rookie edge rushers, that whole front, like you're alluding to here, is going to be almost brand new. So it's going to be interesting with a new play caller in Jeff Ulbrich, who did not get the most out of his guys in New York after Saleh was fired. So there's just a lot of different ways it could go wrong, and I think it's going to ultimately end up going wrong.
I'm trying to like come up with a hypothetical. Like, would you rather have Michael Penix in a vacuum for just one season, or let's say Sam Darnold? Like, would you rather have you're the Seattle Seahawks? Would you rather have Michael Penix or Sam Darnold starting for your team in 2025? I just want to get a baseline of kind of what we expect from Michael Penix in 2025.
Penix is the hometown hero, so that's a
That's
factor there.
true. Yeah.
But then again, Ryan Grubb was their play caller, and it didn't work out super well. So I don't know. I would probably have to say Darnold on two fronts. One, the experience, both good and bad, right? But this is year 8 or 9 for him. He's the same draft class as Josh Allen, so he's been in the league for quite some time, right? And then I would also say his health, or Penix wasn't hurt when he played last year, but you alluded to it. He had 4 straight season-ending injuries in college. He was a 6th-year senior when he was drafted. So I think the injury or the medical long-term health or shopping list of injuries, whatever you want to call it, I think Sam Darnold's cleaner on that front. So I would probably have Darnold, even contract relative. I would probably still have Darnold, but I think that's a good comparison or a good litmus test for QBs, if you will.
Same question, but with Kyler Murray.
So Penix or Murray or
Yes.
Darnold? Okay. Uh, Man, I used to be a Kyler guy, but last year he got under my skin. I think I'd still have to go Kyler with his level of creativity. Even
Okay.
and people like to talk about Penix's arm strength. Kyler is a top 5 arm in the league. People just don't
Yeah.
realize it because he's a little guy. But I can't. I'm shorter than him. I can't say that. But he was what, the 10th overall pick or something in the MLB draft that same year.
Yeah.
He has a legitimate arm, and I think a lot of people don't understand that he makes up for his smaller stature with the ability to fire into tight windows. So I think I would go with Kyler.
So I think it's fair to say the expectation is like, a little bit below Kyler and Darnold, but let's say he's above the tier with like Aaron Rodgers, Daniel Jones,
Mhm.
that sort of kind of range where it's like, expecting between 16 and 22 kind of for Michael Penix this year.
Touchdowns, you're
Like
saying?
just I guess rank in the
Oh, rank.
NFL.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that's a plus outlook. I would honestly put him in the same tier as guys that we've talked about, Caleb Williams and Bryce Young, in terms of
Yeah.
I think we need to see the growth from all of these young guys there.
Let's get into the last take. And this is my last take of today. Again, we'll have more in future episodes, but my last take is I think the San Francisco's are due to disappoint again. Um, I'm just going to list off all of the injuries that they have on this team because it's like kind of nuts. And I get that everybody's projecting them to have somewhat of a bounce back year, but just listen to the amount of injuries. And I'll include, I guess, the suspension in here too. But Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings, Jacob Cowing, Jordan Watkins, who is I think, 4th-round rookie. Demarcus Robinson was just suspended for the first 3 games of the season. Isaac Guerrero, Jordan James, I think Keyshawn Vaughn is hurt too right now. Ben Bartch, their starting left guard. Dom Pooney, their starting right guard. Michael Williams, their first-round pick. Nick Bosa is currently hurt right now. CJ West is questionable. Yetur Gross-Matos is hurt as well. Malik Mustafa, starting safety. Lenoir, their starting corner, and Upton Stout, their starting nickel. So that's like how many guys? I don't even know. Just a ton. It could be bad, and I get that like a lot of the projection with them is they're getting guys back from last year, and I guess my main question is like, are they really? I mean, they're missing so many players already, and we haven't even started the regular season yet. So I think this may just be more of a symptom of the types of players that they have on their team rather than just the injury bug consistently getting this team of everybody else. So considering the depth that they lost both offensively and defensively in free agency, Dre Greenlaw, Talanoa Hufanga, Jalen Moore. I mean, it's like you consider that it's been like years since they've notably invested in their offensive line. That could come back to bite them this year. And then just looking at their defensive line, like Mike Hill Williams, CJ West, Alfred Collins, that's 3 guys that could potentially start on their D line. And, I'm just not super optimistic that that's going to provide a winning formula to a defense that really needs to improve upon what they were last year. And for an offense that just, it's been super reliant on the weapons that they've had over the past, half decade. Really, when you look at the weapons that they have now, it's like Christian McCaffrey, who I think is like 29, 30 years old right now. George Kittle, who's I think 31 or 32 years old. So it's just, it does not have the juice that Kyle Shanahan is used to. They don't have the depth in the trenches on either side of the ball that they once had. And then you just look at the injuries that have stacked up in just training camp preseason. And I think that it's kind of scary if you're a 49ers fan right now.
I hear every argument that you've made about the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to
Sounds
give
like
you
you're going
my
to disagree.
I'm going to give you my grade really quick, and this will be the lowest grade I think so far between the two episodes. I'm going to go C minus, and I'm
Okay.
going that high, I guess, because of the just all of the evidence you presented. Right, these injuries are real. It's not like a lot of these are. I'm sure some of these are minor, but like Ayuk's not going to start for like the first 4 to 6 weeks. Right, Juwan Jennings missed most of camp. Like they just traded for Sky Moore, right at the top
Yeah.
of the show. Like we talked about this, that they need the guys that are like that. And then I look at some of the additions that they brought in, namely Robert Sala, who is probably he or D'Amico Ryans were probably the best defensive play callers in Shanahan's time in San Francisco. I think no matter who's there, he's going to have them playing much, much better than the guy that was there last year that replaced it was an internal hire that replaced Steve Wilks. But by the way, they were a top 5 defense when Steve Wilks was there. They jettisoned him and then they kind of fell off. So I think they're going to get back to where they were when people are healthy on that side of the ball. And then my main argument against it is just look at their schedule. I know we said this up like for 3 separate segments, but they play 4 games against teams that were in the playoffs last year, and 2 of those are the Rams, who I think we all have concerns about this season. They're marquee down the stretch games to force playoffs or to look at playoff contention. Let's look at their last 8 weeks. Arizona, Carolina, Monday night game. Cleveland, they have a bye week. Tennessee, Indianapolis, Chicago, and then not San Francisco, Seattle. I'm looking at the level of quarterbacks, the level of teams they have to face, and even if they get half of those guys back for a majority of the season, I have a lot of faith that this team can be at least a wild card team. And maybe that's the level of disappointment when this is a team that very fairly could win 12 games. Maybe winning 9 games is the disappointment you're alluding to. But I think you're intimating a bit more like they might be a 500 team or just under 500 team or a losing team or something like that. But it's really, unless there's even more injuries, and I think they're due for actually positive health regression given McCaffrey didn't play the whole year. Ayuk tore his ACL in week 4 last year. It was quite early. Trent Williams was hurt for a chunk of last year. I think they're due for some positives on that front, and they just don't play anybody. I'm going to keep going back to that until, like, if they come out the gate really slow and get blown out by Sam Darnold and then lose to Tyler Shuck, maybe I'll change my tune. But I really can't see them losing a lot of games when their third hardest QB that they're playing is probably Bryce Young. We'll say it's Trevor Lawrence. I don't want to disrespect Trevor Lawrence, so we'll say Trevor Lawrence is the third best QB they'll play all year.
It will be Bryce Young by the time they play Bryce Young.
By that point, that's fair. But like, just pull up the schedule if you have a chance. It's so like you talked about the Bears having a 4th place schedule and how it's a bit easier for them. The Niners have the 4th place schedule because they were in last, and so they get the Bears. The who would be the other team? The Giants will be the other team that they get, and by virtue of playing both the AFC and NFC South, not a lot of winners in the non-conference games.
Man, it's their schedule is like probably one of the most optimistic that I've seen, like looking preseason at a schedule. But the only thing I'll say is I feel like we say that a lot of times and then it ends up just not coming to fruition. I kind of think about it with like a lot of times in fantasy, like where it's just so much harder to project let's just say like a receiving situation than maybe what we consider ourselves being evaluators at. Like we could end up looking at that schedule at the end of the year and being like, man, they had to play this team, that team, this team all in a row. I think that there's a little bit more uncertainty, but I do definitely understand where you're coming from because, we were talking about the Niners in the 2-point conversion chat, I think the other day. And I think you sent the schedule, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't know it was that bad, but I'm too far in. I kind of have to stick with it. And I just, there's so many injuries, there's so much attrition. And obviously, I think Shanahan combined with Purdy is like certified one of the best quarterback head coaching duos in the league. And that alone is probably going to get you a pretty substantial floor. Purdy, I think, also really improved a lot of things that he didn't get
Yeah.
credit for last year. I mean, you look online, the discourse around him, and it's still like people consider him to be like the 17th best quarterback in the NFL. And I think he's at this point like borderline top 10, maybe even higher than that. But yeah, I mean, it's just there's so much in terms of injuries and loss of depth for this team that it, to me, just looking at it, makes me a little bit anxious with this team. But I definitely get the concerns with their schedule because they don't play anybody, at least not anybody that we know of right now. So I think that's going to do it for football talk, at least today's episode. We're going to start getting into a regular kind of cadence as the regular season starts. So I guess we can go ahead and announce the recording schedule for the regular season, if that's okay with you. We're going to record episodes on Wednesdays before the Thursday night game. We're going to kind of preview all of the games throughout the week. And then on Sunday nights, I think it's going to depend on the week, but probably during Sunday Night Football is when we'll go live for just recapping the previous week's games, everything that happened on Sunday, things of that nature. So that's going to be the cadence moving forward, probably starting in September. Week 1 is when we're going to aim to do that. Jacob, do you have anything that you want to plug for the 2-point conversion, for anything else?
For sure. The draft article that I mentioned that we're gonna hopefully get out there before the weekend, so that kind of outlines, week 0 and that kind of thing. Throughout the season, I'll be doing draft stuff as well, like honing in on certain positions. On some of the episodes, I'm sure we'll mention standout performances from college players on those Saturdays. Maybe on the Wednesdays we can look into that, or some. We'll figure it out. But it's officially going to be draft season as soon as Farmageddon kicks off at noon on Saturday. So, or I guess 11 a.m. Central Time. So once draft season starts, I'll be pumping out more and more draft stuff.
So yeah, man, I'm super excited for college football, for the NFL season to start. Just like, I don't know, 2 weeks away at this point, something like that.
Yeah, 2 weeks and a day. Yeah.
Yeah, it's exciting. We got some like really fun week 1 matchups that we're going to preview in about 2 weeks time. I guess 2 weeks from today, actually. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for football talk by the 2-point conversion. The only thing that I want to plug is that I'm going to be posting on my YouTube channel at some point, hopefully this week. We'll see. I have a video going up about score bugs, their designs, things of that nature from, Fox, CBS, any NFL network that you watch football on. So be tuned for that. That'll be dj.mp4. In terms of the 2-point conversion, we have a ton of projects that we're working on. We're going to have a huge, massive roundtable with a ton of predictions coming out soon, probably next week for that. And then we will be back at some point next week as well. You can follow me at dj.png. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire, and you can follow the 2-point conversion at 2p_conversion on Twitter or on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Substack. So with that, we will see you guys later.